Hello, I'm Ken Jabert with the Orange County Library System here at the Hiawassee Branch in Orlando, Florida, on January the 10th, 2013, capturing memories from our community. Please tell us your name and where you're from.
My name is Barbara Jeanette Anderson, and I'm from Orlando, Florida. Orla Vista was plotted in the 1920s, and the first public building was had that Spanish mission style. It was a fire station and a public service building, and the fire chief lived upstairs in that building. When the Depression hit, the town went under, like so many small towns in Florida and throughout this nation. And so many Northerners, Arla Vista was plotted out for Northerners, your carpenters, your skilled laborers from Ohio. Winter Park was basically settled by the very wealthy and their servants from Chicago. Arla Vista also has a very unique past that actually there's two historical things that I should mention. When I was growing up, for about 2 weeks in January, February, sometime along in then, at that time, the streets would be full, the dirt roads would be full of traffic, expensive cars, people coming from everywhere. They were there for the rooster fights that used to be in what is now the park, down in a pit area. That was discontinued in the 50s, and it was finally outlawed in the state in the mid-60s, thankfully. And so many of the residents that stayed year-round in Arla Vista raised the roosters for those fights. And another thing I must mention while I'm talking to you is that what we know of as Orlando was called Jernigan. In Florida became a state, let's see, in 1845. Jernigan settled in this area. He fought the Indians. He came here from Georgia, and he fought in both Georgia and in Florida in the Indian Wars. He homesteaded a large area in what is, and had his home in what is now called Holden Heights. But Jernigan, in those days with the cowboys and so forth, this was a very rough territory, and one handled their business. The sheriff wasn't always there, and so there was a ruckus at one of his establishments, and he took care of it, and he ended up shooting a judge. Oh, I should say before I finish that part that he was the first representative for Central Florida in 1845 with the state to Tallahassee. He, like I said, shot a judge, and he was, of course, you don't do that. And so he he and his wife and some of his family went to Texas and lived there for many years. And then later in his life, he came back to Florida, and his wife's remains are in the Arla Vista Cemetery. And there is a plaque there that was designated, placed there by the Orlando Historical Society. And this is a part of Florida history and Central Florida history that we need to remember. I should mention one more thing about Arla Vista. The Old Winter Garden Road is part of the original, what they used to call the old red brick road, which was a winding road, which was the first east to west connector of Florida. It started over in what is Mims, wind around into Oviedo and different places through Arla Vista to Gotha and over to Ocoee, all the way over to Crystal River. And I understand that in Ocoee, that they have the only section of that original red brick road left. But it was a winding road that went, and I used to ask my grandfather, why were all the roads so winding in Florida? And he said, well, Florida was flat, and they purposely made the roads winding so that people would not fall asleep while they were driving, because there were such distances from one place to another. And after every war, Indian War, after every war, people have come into Florida, and people really populated after air conditioning and all, but draining of the swamps and all. But getting to my point here, Miami, in their newspapers, did not advertise or state about hurricanes that happen in the state of Florida, because they did not want to discourage the northerners from coming down to Florida. And after World War I, and you'll probably edit this, that's okay, but it needs to be stated. After World War I, many soldiers were disabled from the gas. I actually met a man, or knew a man, that had been gassed in Germany. These young, strapping young farm boys went off to war, and they came back, and they didn't understand what was going on, nor their families, and they just became where they were unable to do anything, even take care of themselves, much less work on the farms any longer. And so their families didn't know what to do with them, and the government had to build hospitals for them. And the government goes for the cheapest. And they took those soldiers on the Flagler railroads down to the Keys, to I believe the first Key, and put a hospital there for those veterans with their doctors and nurses. A hurricane came through and did a lot of damage in Miami. My grandfather was one of the people that was sent down there to check on things. There was no one left, no tents, nothing. The water, the storm had swept the island clean. No trace of those young men, nothing. And like I said, my college professor, I don't remember his name now, wanted to dispute me on that, but he went back and talked to some old timers and found out that yes, there had been a hurricane at that period of time. I can't remember the year now, but I state this because we need to have respect for our soldiers, men and women, and any of our service people, or I should say all of our service people. We need to have respect.
Well, thank you very much
I
for
know
your time today.
I have wandered and wandered, and I could go.
That's okay. It was
But-
fascinating to hear.